So we're in your government book. We're in chapter 9 in the section 3, and we were going over the Bill of Rights. There's 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights, and we got to amendment number 9. And amendment number 9 says, the unenumerated rights of the people. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Oh my goodness, so what does this mean? Enumerated, that word, unenumerated. Basically, that there are a lot of rights that are not going to be listed in the Bill of Rights, is what they're saying. That only a few people's rights are listed, and the fact that a certain right is not enumerated, numbered, does not mean that we do not have that right. So we do not have to surrender certain rights merely because they're not listed in the group, is what they're saying. So the amendment reaffirms the constitutional principle that we have a limited government used to exercise limited power, right? So here's amendment. Let's go on to the next page. So some legal scholars basically want to use the Ninth Amendment to claim a right to privacy, or basically in order to sanction immorality by abortionists and homosexuals and any other groups that want to practice moral deviancy, as saying, okay, that's our right. We're in the unenumerable rights. They say because the Constitution does not prohibit things like homosexuality and abortion, then such behavior is constitutionally protected. They use this. The Constitution does not address every kind of behavior at all. It doesn't address murder. It doesn't address rape. It doesn't address a lot of things, lies, a lot of things that are not directly mentioned, yet they merit no constitutional protection at all. You're not going to protect a murderer. You're not going to protect a thief, or you're not going to protect someone, abuser, and all these things. Just because a behavior is not mentioned in the Constitution does not mean that it should receive protection as a right. Like freedom of worship. Freedom of worship is our right. Robert Bork said, when constitutional law is judged, made not rooted in text or in structure of the Constitution, it is illegitimate. So what is he saying here? Let's go up here what he says. Legal scholar Robert Bork was right when he said, when constitutional law, that's law, is judge-made, made by the judge, and not rooted in the Constitution, then it's illegitimate. So when a judge has made up a law and said that this is the way it goes, and it's not written down in the Constitution and in the structure of that, then the Constitution, then that law is not legitimate, is not there, not protected, root and branch. So it has to be rooted in the Constitution, doesn't it? So the enumerated rights basically said there will be rights that are not listed here. But then again, we have to go back to the Bible, don't we? And which rights are in the Word of God. And what makes right and what makes wrong. We know that for not only from God's Holy Spirit, but we have the Word to tell us. So, amendment number 10. Amendment number 10 is to the states. Amendment 10 has usually been avoided majorly. Powers reserved to the states. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Basically saying, if the power hasn't been given to the United States through the Constitution, to the federal government, and it's not prohibited by the states, then the states have that power, not the central government. So it's basically giving the power to the states. If it's not listed here, it's power that's reserved for the states, the United States, each state respectively, and not to our federal government in Washington, D.C., is what it's saying. Reserved to the states. So a limited government with a limited power limits our government, and included in the 10th Amendment to reassure citizens that the national government would not devour the state governments, that all powers which the Constitution does not specify to the national government nor prohibit the states from having, they're going to be reserved to the states and the people, not the government. So practically the 10th Amendment has been ignored, it says, by the federal government for the last 100 years. Yes, indeed, it has. So let's go back. I'm sorry, I kind of moved it here. Made you a little crooked. So let's go back here to the Bill of Rights at a glance. First of all, let's talk a little bit more about this 10th Amendment here. I forgot to say one thing about it. Is basically the 10th Amendment ignored is that Congress has justified the use of extra constitutional powers by claiming they have the right to exercise such powers under the necessary and proper clause. Basically saying it's necessary and proper to make these changes, or to make these not necessarily amendments, but to stretch the power of the government. And this is found in Article 1, Section 8. And that's what a lot of them use, is necessary and proper. Is it necessary and proper for us to do this? And a lot of times it's very stretched, I should say. It's like a elastic rubber band. They call it the elastic phrase, because it stretches the power of the government, right? But to do this and interpret the Constitution in this way, this grants Congress unlimited power and violates the principle of limited government, right? And our fathers worked very hard to make our government limited, to limit the power of our government, limit the power of our leaders, in that point that it would turn into tyranny, or turn into a despot or a controller of the people, right? So it's so important that we go by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the 10th Amendment is very important. So before I go over the questions here, let's go back up here to this. But this is very good. The Bill of Rights at a glance. So let's look at the Bill of Rights at a glance here. So at home in the community, we are exempt from unreasonable or unwarranted searches of our house and seizures of our persons, houses, papers, and effects. We are protected there. We are exempt from taking the property for public use without just compensation, them coming in and taking our property. We are exempt from the quartering of soldiers in our home, that soldiers can just come and stay in our home, during peacetime. And we are entitled to worship as we think is right, to speak freely, to publish the truth, to assemble peacefully, and to keep and bear arms. These are all in our Bill of Rights. In a court of law, we are exempt from being tried twice for the same offense. We are exempt from bearing witness against ourselves. We are exempt from excessive bail and excessive fines. We are exempt from the infliction of cruel and unusual punishments in a court of law. We are entitled to the petition for redress of grievances. We are entitled to due process of law regarding life, liberty, and property. We are entitled to a speedy public trial by an impartial jury. We are entitled to be informed of the nature and cause of an accusation against us. We are entitled to confront any witness against us. We are entitled to obtain witnesses in our favor. And we are finally entitled to the assistance of a counsel or a lawyer for our defense. These are all in the court of law. This is in Amendment 5 and Amendment 6. Most of these are in the court of law. As for these others, they're in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and on to the 7th Amendment in the Bill of Rights. So, and then of course we have the last one, the power to the states, that's not followed these days. So let's go on to the questions. What are the two dominant ideas of the Second Amendment? The Second Amendment. What is the Second Amendment? The right to bear arms, right? So the two ideas, the first idea is that militia are necessary to the security of a free state. So we need militia being armed people, right? That's number one. The militia are necessary to the security of a free state. Number two is the right to bear arms cannot be infringed or violated. That we have the right to bear arms, and we also have a right for a militia of civilian nature, those two. Number two, what right does the Third Amendment guarantee one in regard to his home? Well, the Third Amendment guarantees that no soldier shall be, in times of peace or even in times of war, be quartered in any house without consent of the owner. So the soldiers can't come to your house and say, okay, we're going to live in your house right now. And that's what they used to do. Number three, what right is guaranteed in the Fourth Amendment? The Fourth Amendment guarantees unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant, without a search warrant. That without a search warrant, they can't come into your house and just take things they want. Number four, what, according to journalist Walter Williams, is the most human right of all? The right to possess your property. It's the right to have private property. So, number five, what rights does the Fifth Amendment guarantee? The Fifth Amendment guarantees that no ordinary citizen can be accused of capital crime without a grand jury, right? And there's some other, let's go back, there's a few others too. That's not the only one. It goes back to those. Let's go back to show you which ones are the Fifth Amendment. Just went over them. The Fifth Amendment's right here in a court of law. You can't be tried twice for the same offense. We are exempt from bearing witness against ourselves. On to excessive bail and excessive fines. That's actually the Eighth Amendment. Those two things are very important there. And also to be informed of the nature and cause of our accusation against us, and to be able to confront any witnesses against us, and to obtain witnesses in our favor. These all have to do with criminal trials, and that's has to do with the Fifth Amendment. So what right is guaranteed in the Sixth Amendment? The Sixth Amendment, that too is about in the midst of criminal trials and such. The Sixth Amendment says that you have the right to a speedy and public trial by impartial jury of your state or the state that the crime was committed in. So basically says that you have a right for a speedy and public trial. It used to be they would charge people back in the old days, and they would hold them in prison for years and years and years before they'd go to trial. Crazy. And even torture them during that time. So a speedy and public trial. Number 7, what is provided by the Seventh Amendment? The Seventh Amendment provides a jury trial in civil cases of any values over $20. So if there's a discrepancy of $20 between two persons, one person can take that person to trial by jury. Now, a lot of times they're settled out of court, of course, but we have the right for a trial by jury for anything that's over $20 of value. Number 8. What does the 8th Amendment prohibit? Excessive punishments. The 8th Amendment prohibits to be excess bail, excessive fines, no cruel or unusual punishment. So that is foundational. We look at the 8th Amendment for excessive punishments. What did the Supreme Court decide about capital punishment in Furman versus Georgia in 1972? Basically, they said in 1972 that capital punishment or the death sentence was cruel and unusual punishment. And this created a long time for a lot of those that were murderers and such to have life sentences instead, which is not really biblical. Basically, for murder and those kinds, they deserve to have capital punishment. Now, of course, they can give their hearts to Jesus before that. That's for sure. And it says, okay, in Gregg versus Georgia. In Gregg versus Georgia, both of these are Georgia. It's kind of weird. But Gregg versus Georgia was 1976, 4 years later. And basically, they said that the death penalty does not violate the Constitution. And so they brought the death penalty back. So in 1972, they took it away. 1976, they brought back the death penalty. And Gary Gilmore was executed. He was a murderer. So on to what protections are guaranteed in the 9th Amendment. So in the 9th Amendment, the fact that certain rights are not named enumerable does not mean that we do not have those rights. So just because the rights are not there doesn't mean you do not have those rights, is what the 9th Amendment says. Okay, so we got through that. We're going to go ahead and stop here. I wanted to go into the next chapter, but I'm going to do another video on the next chapter. So let's stop here.